Hello and good evening. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to the 67th San Francisco International Film Festival. I feel like I'm going to get on my tiptoes because of my, there we go. I'm Ann Lai, the Executive Director at SFFILM, which presents the festival. We're really thrilled to be on day 4 of our festival. So we are here in the wonderful Vogue Theater to celebrate and honor a world premiere of a film on the invention of species. This film is also receiving the Sloan Science on Screen Prize. And we, as an organization, have had a very long history with the Sloan Foundation. And I'm going to call up our wonderful partner at Sloan who will tell us a little bit more about the organization. But what I will say is since 2015, through this partnership, we have provided over $600,000 in grants directly to filmmakers developing feature films in their work. We've awarded over $150,000 to completed films being released into the world, including Colin West's Linoleum, Michael Almereda's Experimenter, Adam McKay's Don't Look Up, and recently Christopher Nolan's Oppenheimer. And what the work is really about sort of exposure to what curiosity and exploration and these themes of science are, which are all about life and humanity. Beyond the direct cash grant that often happens and is given to our filmmakers, we also provide holistic support for those filmmakers supporting their films. I think I see we might have some of our grantees in the audience, so we're very happy that they're here today. And I'm just going to plug for a second. If we have filmmakers in the audience, we do have a grant open right now for application for the Sloan Science and Cinema Fellowship. So our deadline is coming up in a few weeks. So please go to our website, sffilm.org, and have a look. For those of you who aren't familiar with the mission of the Alfred P. Sloan Foundation, we are going to invite up to the podium the foundation's Vice President and Program Director, Doran Weber.
Thanks, Ann. Hi, everybody. Great to be here with you. As Ann said, it's our 10th year. We love this festival. For those of you who don't know about Sloan, just very briefly, we're a nonprofit philanthropy founded in 1934. Makes us 90 years old this year. And we make grants for research and education in science, technology, and economics. And this event today is part of our program, Public Understanding of Science Technology. And I'm now going to show you a brief video about the program overall. Please roll. So actually, one film that's missing from there that won our award at SFFILM this year, Oppenheimer, which is based on a Sloan book, American Prometheus. So, of course, we love blockbusters, but not every film can be as successful as Oppenheimer. But there are a lot of important and beautiful films, and we're going to honor one tonight. And before I call up the filmmaker to receive our award, I just want to say we're very good at picking winners. One of our signature programs called Sloan Research Fellowships. It's given to scientists early in their career, and 58 of them have gone on to win the Nobel Prize. So when you get an award from us, hopefully it means something. So in that spirit, and of course Charles Darwin, just as one I have to say is, again, one of the most monumental figures, not just in science but in history. And we, for about 30 years, we supported something called the Correspondence of Charles Darwin, which was a pioneering project to put together 15,000 letters. He corresponded with everyone during his lifetime that forms a kind of history of science, religion, philosophy, and magisterial work. And so we were so delighted when we came across a film that is the first film ever, narrative film ever shot fully in the Galapagos Island. It's you're in for a real treat tonight. So with that, let me just call up the filmmaker, Tania Hermida, for On the Invention of Species, winners of this year's Sloan Science on Screen Award. Please give her a big hand.
Thank you. Wow. Thank you so much to the Sloan Foundation, to the San Francisco International Film Festival, and to all of you gathered here together to watch our film's world premiere. It's been like such a long trip to get here. And for me, this is the night that the film will be actually born. because the film does not exist until it is projected to an audience. So we are very, very happy to be here. I want to thank my family and friends who came all the way from Ecuador, from Cuenca, to be with me here tonight in this very special night. I want to thank one of the actors who will come up later in the Q&A for coming all the way from Texas to be with us tonight. And I feel like so honored to have received this award. And at the same time, I feel so much at home when I see your video where all the ideas about the foundation are condensed, because they are the ideas that were on the birth of this script and of this film. This film, obviously, from the title, is inspired by 3 books. One of them is Darwin's On the Origin of Species, of course, that he wrote after being in the Galapagos. The other one is the book of Genesis. As you'll see very soon, the story happens in 7 days, the days of creation. And finally, the other book that has to do with this film is Shehrazade's 1001 Nights, as this woman who has to tell stories in order to survive. So this film is mainly about this coming-of-age story where a teenager realizes that she belongs to a species that will go extinct if it's not able to create new stories in order to survive. So I'm so thankful that you are here tonight, and I'm so thankful with the festival for allowing us to be here tonight with you and sharing this film with you, because I'm convinced that as a species, our only chance to survive and not go extinct is this gathering around the fire to share our stories that come from our pains, our losses, and our joys. So please be part of this film, and it's yours. Thank you so much.
And I just want to quickly let people know how the evening is going to go after you watch this wondrous and immersive film. I couldn't have done, oh my gosh, I mean, that was the best introduction. I had some remarks prepared, but I'm skipping over them all because Tania did it so well. But I do want to let people know that after the film rolls, we're going to move these chairs up on stage, and we're going to have a bit of an extended conversation about the film, the scientific element in it. We're going to be joined not only by Tania and cast member Jeff Frazier, but also a scientist from Berkeley, Noah Whiteman, who worked on his thesis in Galapagos Islands. So we hope you'll stick around for that. Enjoy the film. Please join me in welcoming director Tania Hermida. And before we bring the rest of the guests up, we actually have something that was missing at the top of the show. And Joey, if you can hand it to me, because one of the things that came along with her prize was a check for $5,000 from the Sloan family. Oh, I'm going to hand this back to Joey. Thank you, Joey. Thank you, Check. So, Tania, if you can please join me on stage. We are also very pleased to have the singing gringo, Jeff Frazier. Hopefully the chair is just as comfortable as that hammock. And now I want to introduce the Professor of Genetics, Genomics, Evolution, and Development, and Director of the Essig Museum of Entomology at UC Berkeley. Please join me in welcoming Noah Whiteman. So we're going to talk a little bit about, let's see, this microphone doesn't seem to like me that much. Oh, you're going to trade? Thank you. There we go. All right. So first, we're going to talk on stage a little bit about the film, about the science in the film, and some other interesting elements. And then, of course, we're going to have some time for audience questions. So I'm going to go back to your introduction where you talked about the three foundational texts, right? The Darwin, Scheherazade, and the Book of Genesis. So how do you see those as the heart of the story? And then also, because it's really interesting that Carla becomes the fulcrum for the story, and how does she relate to those foundational texts?
Okay, so in a script, in a film, there's always something that one has already gone through in a metaphorical way or sometimes in a literal way. But maybe I'd like to tell you all that when I came out of high school, I actually started studying medicine. I went to medical school. And at that point, I made, of course, this big crisis, this vocational crisis, because I felt that I wanted to approach questions about life, but not from a scientific point of view only. It was like science is great, it explains so many things, but in the end, all those things that have to do with the meaning of life are not explained science. So in that way, I in a way find that in this script, I finally put all those things in a fiction, in a narrative story that have to do with this idea that besides evolution and we becoming like a species of our own, I actually believe that we as a species invent ourselves every time, and as a society, as a species, we have the chance to reinterpret the meaning of our lives when everything seems to be meaningless, in a personal, private way, or in a global way. In fact, I think we are at that point as globally now, where things seem not to have any sense anymore. We are at one of those points in a certain way. And I believe that the only way to go through that is to approach it from a narrative, from a new narrative that makes meaning for us, that draws an idea, some idea of a future, of a shared future. So I went like all the way to say that for me as a scriptwriter, those three texts have been foundational. So I thought that this girl who has this father, of course, a scientific that has to do with the conservation of species that are in extinction. His presence and his discourse is not enough for her, because for her it's not about, at that point, it's not about biological survival, it's about spiritual survival. And then the Book of Genesis, interpreted as a narrative also, as you can see. It's like, not like a dogma, but like a narrative that has to do, in this case, with the idea of the girl becoming herself through this week, which is not a great week. And of course, this foundational story for all of us about Scheherazade, about this woman that has to, that confronts power through narrative, that confronts the possibility of death through the possibility of telling a significant story that keeps power from killing her. Did I go like anywhere when answering your question?
Well, you actually did go somewhere interesting. That was my follow-up question, because one of the things that Noah and I were talking about outside was how you kind of, the slight name change from the Darwin book is really important. And in each of those examples of these foundational texts, you're talking about invention, right? And invention is, of course, related to evolution, but it's not the same thing. And and one of the things that I forgot to mention when I brought Noah up on stage is that he did his thesis work in Galapagos. So I wonder if you can talk a little bit about that, and then maybe we'll circle back to invention versus origin.
Sure, I'd be happy to. First, I just want to say how I love this film so much. I watched it 4 times now. I had a secret link. And so I did my PhD dissertation research in the Galapagos Islands. And I was down there 4 different times. And we were studying the Galapagos hawk. And that's the bird that you may have heard a few times. It sounds like a red-tailed hawk or a red-shouldered hawk. So it's in the same genus. And it's the top predator in Galapagos. And so I captured 200 Galapagos hawks over the course of 4 years. We were camping on islands down there, sometimes for 2 months at a time. And I was studying the parasites that the birds brought with them, their ancestors brought with them to the archipelago when they colonized the islands about 150,000 years ago. And so, I didn't realize at the time how amazing my fortune was landing in Galapagos as a 20-something researcher. But I guess the thing that when I heard the sounds of the Galapagos hawks, and I knew the island of Isabella, where we had also sampled hawks, it really struck a chord because I hadn't heard the hawks since 2004, I think. And so that was quite an extraordinary moment for me. And it was, just we're getting into the details, but when Carla's underwater and you can hear the clicking of the ocean and then pops up above the water, the sound, just from a scientific perspective, was really remarkable, the natural sounds. All the Darwin's finches you heard in the background, the mockingbirds, the Galapagos mockingbirds. So all these things were clicking in my mind, which makes me have even more respect for the filmmaker because of the accuracy of all of that.
Cool.
I must say that credit is for our sound engineer, because he's absolutely obsessive with putting the right birds in the right scenes, in the right islands. And myself, was telling him, come on, Juan Jose, but look at this bird. It's so beautiful. Let's put it. And he said, no, that bird is from the Andes. And I said, are you kidding me? Who's going to notice it's from the Andes? And he said, I know there will be some freak coming, some bird freak saying one day, that bird's from the Andes, it's not from the Galapagos. So I'll tell him that there was that freak watching the film so he can feel proud of himself.
Him.
No, that's okay. That's a great aside. One of the things that is central to the movie, it seems to me, is names, right? And once again, we're talking about invention because some of the people are renaming themselves in the course of the film or even at the very beginning. And then, of course, the gringo has no name, right? And so let's talk a little bit about what you wanted to do, how you wanted to play with names in writing the film.
Well, that takes me back to all my films. This is my 3rd feature, and the 3 films are very different in the story they tell and in the locations they've been shot. One is a road movie, one is a movie set in the 70s, and this one. But in the 3 of them, there's several things that are in common. I say they have the same DNA, But one of them is that the main characters, these girls or teenagers, they rename themselves. They invent a name of their own. And it has to do with this idea that is the core idea of the 3 films.
Here.
Yeah. The gringo has nothing to say. No, the core idea of the 3 films in the end, and this is actually something that I can only see from now backwards. It's like Harriet says in the in the movie, nobody knows what they come for until they leave. So we can only know what happened to us when it's already happened. So while it was happening, I didn't realize, but now I realize that in the 3 films, there's this story about a girl, a young girl, a teenager, who discovers the power of words, who discovers the liberating force that comes from giving ourselves our own name in a metaphorical and literal way, and discovering how healing storytelling can be when it is significant and helps us reinterpret ourselves and our place in the world. And the character that gives them the power to go into that other side of things, another side of language, is always played by the same actor who plays Harriet here. And he plays in my first film a character called Jesus. And in my second film, El Tío Loco, the crazy uncle. And so that's sort of the mentor who helps the girl pass this door and go into the poetic side of gaining a poetic view of the world. Okay. You see? So, of course, and the 3 girls in my films, at some point, they change their names. And they say, okay, no, I'm Island.
So that's the connecting DNA that you were speaking of. And then for your scene, which is brief but memorable, did you pick the song that you were going to sing?
I picked the song.
Because I noticed in the credits it said interpreted with your name, like played and interpreted by you.
Yes, it's a song I wrote in 2001 after 9/11 and anthrax and my grandmother dying. Her name's Millie. And so, yes, I wrote and sang it song. And it got into the hands of Tania because we recorded it back in the days with our band, the Iguana Men of Galapagos. Quite original. And I was just thrilled. One of our songs got into Tania's first movie. Si no estoy aquí es porque me fui. If I'm not here, it's because I'm gone. Deep. And so Tania, I've lived on and off in Isabel Island, Galapagos for 30 years now. I raised 4 children there.
Oh, wow.
Triplet boys and their little sister, Isla.
Okay.
The first girl I knew who was called Isla is his daughter.
And I taught at the university on the mainland and practiced law, did some environmental work, sued most of the oil companies in the Amazon. And then I would run away to the island and sit in my hammock and play guitar. And so I was sitting in my hammock, my hair was a bit longer and with a bottle of rum and a guitar. The phone rings and it's Tania saying, I've got an idea for a new movie. And there's a role in it for an old gringo with scraggly beard and gray hair sitting in a hammock and playing guitar. Do you know anyone? Anyway, just the being able to be involved with Tania on anything, and particularly something that I feel so important is this movie because I can't see, so a show of hands, most of us don't realize that human beings live in the Galapagos Islands and have for 100 years, hundreds of years. The whalers, the pirates, the colonists, the prisoners. This was all very real. There was a prison colony. It's an extraordinary place, and the human history of our islands just simply haven't been told. And that's what enthuses me so much about what Tania's done here. It's magic and beautiful, and thank you.
Thank you for your songs.
Always.
One of the last things I want to talk about, and then maybe we can get the house lights up and we'll take some questions from the audience, is about the character of Harriet. And I wasn't aware that the actor has been in your other films as well. But there's kind of an elemental force to that person, and especially because the living environment seems very much a piece of nature, right? There's no roof to where Harriet is, and even the accoutrements within seem to change, right? The papers of the books are different from the first time that we meet Harriet. And so I wonder kind of what kind of force you were aiming for that part in the film to be.
Well, creating Harriet was one of the most amazing experiences in doing this movie, because I had this actor play the mentor in the two previous films, but I didn't consider him for this film because from the beginning in the script it was a lady. It was an old shamana, an old healer who had come to the island many years ago and had survived by telling stories. And so I started, first of all, I started casting women actresses for the role, but I couldn't find one that really convinced me. Is this working? Okay.
Okay.
And so at some point I was like, I don't know what to do, and I don't know what to do. And then I talked with Martin, who is sitting somewhere there. There he is. He is a creative collaborator, an amazing creating collaborator. And I said, I don't know what to do. And he said to me, it's Pancho, the actor. And at first I said, no, not really. I'd love to, but this time it has to be a woman because I've conceived her as a woman, and with a man it wouldn't work. No. And he said, Pancho can play the woman. And that was those eureka moments in creation where you realize, of course, because this has all to do with mutation, and this has all to do with transitions, and the man playing a woman and playing a trans woman and a trans old lady has to do with everything we're trying to tell. And then all the story made sense because it's about isolation and time. And that's how this woman turned into a healer after just, we assume, running away from danger outside the island. And then the art director came in, the production designer, I think you call the production designer here. And we started conceiving how her house was going to be. And he was a genius. And he said, she mustn't have a house. She must have made an habitat, an environment out of the islands, out of what the islands have given her. And so it shouldn't be a house. It should be some place that she turned into an habitable place. And so we were so lucky to find this place with the abandoned boats. And then everything in creating Harriet was magical, because then when we had the boat, we went there and we started conceiving, okay, what would she have done with the boat? And we said, it's scenario, she turned it into a scenario, you know, and she put a curtain and she dances there and she tells the stories and she performs, you know. So it's those magical things about creation that you don't really plan, but they come to you, and they fit into the story very well. So finally, as you can see, Harriet is this healer that has grabbed all the stories from the islands and turned them into significant stories for the visitors who come looking for help.
Right.
And in this case, she tells Ayla all these stories, and especially the poem wrote by a poet that went to the Galapagos and had his son committed suicide, and he made this poem for his son. And that's a real poem, and that's a real story.
And I saw the name of the credits, but it went by a little too fast for me to write it down. The name of the poet?
The poet is Efraín Jara Hidrobo.
Efraín.
He's for me, one of the greatest poems of Ecuador and of our city, Cuenca. And he himself went to live in Floreana, in one of the islands in the Galapagos, for a long time, trying to heal himself from alcoholism. You see? So in the end, what I see here, what I see when my film is already finished, is that finally what drove me to do this film is to grab stories, real and fiction stories, and even religious stories and scientific stories, and make them meaningful for this young creature who is coming of age and has just bleeded for the first time and lost a brother and cannot find answers in the science her father offers her, and must look for spiritual answers through art.
And also, it seems her friends.
Oh, yes.
Delightful characters that they are. And just one of the things that I'm interested, since I didn't know you watched the film 4 times. So is this the 5th time? Oh, okay. So watch. I mean, you must also be watching it from a scientific point of view. But then, as you're watching it multiple times, I wonder what I know what more was revealed to me when I watched it. This was my 3rd time, but I'm just curious what was revealed to you, and especially seeing it on the big screen, it's a revelation.
Yeah, I really did need to see it multiple times to pick up all the threads that were woven together in such a masterful way. And as an evolutionary biologist, we study speciation, which is the origin of new species, and extinction of those species, and patterns over vast expanses of time. And, there have been about 5 mass extinctions where that's really skyrocketed. We might be in a 6th mass extinction that we're causing. And the big ones, those 5 big ones, what happens afterwards is there's a recovery. Over the next 20 million, 30 million years, there's a recovery, and new species fill those niches that were, where species were lost. And so when I was seeing it this time, I thought, wow, there's a lot there. There's a lot of, sort of the mirroring of the evolution and the sort of story of the reinvention of Carla, which is the story of all of us, right? There's so much there, and I thought you wedded the science and the heart and art so well that I think every evolutionary biologist should watch this film too. So yeah, so for me, seeing it this time on the big screen, it really brought it to the fore. And maybe it was seeing just the beautiful natural landscape and the people in it, and thinking about my own life in this context. So yeah.
Cool. All right. So with that in mind, we're going to bring up the house lights and see if there are questions in the audience. We do have a microphone. Yes. The microphones seem to be competing for attention tonight, but if you have a question for anybody in our group, please raise your hand and we'll bring the mic to you.
Tania, you have lifted my Ecuadorian pride to a level that has been it's been the lowest for the past few months. Thank you so much. I would like everybody here to know that you are a trailblazer, a true trailblazer, because it's so hard to make film in Ecuador, and it's incredible hard to work in Galapagos, as you may all know. And I think it will be really important for this audience to understand how difficult probably was to make this film. You make it sound like it was all wonderful because you are an amazing artist, but I think it will be great if you can share a little bit of the struggle of what it is to make films in Ecuador.
Okay, so very briefly, making films in any independent environment is very difficult. And in Ecuador, it's very difficult also because, for example, for this film, we needed to go to these islands where there's nothing in terms of herramientas, how do you say?
Tools?
Tools for filmmaking.
Yeah.
So, as in every case, difficulties make you creative. So what happened here is that we went to the islands taking a minimum crew and a minimum amount of equipment. And one of our colleagues, whom we call Rambo, he's called Rambo in the film industry, he, when we arrived to Isabela, he made the things that we could not bring because we didn't have like the resources to bring like an airplane of our own with all the things. So he made the dollies in order to make the travelings. He made the a pluma, how do you say, like a small grua?
Crane.
Crane. Okay, so we made things in the island so as not to have to bring them in. And then we worked with natural light, most of it, and then just spots of light. For filmmakers, we took no HMIs. It's like the big lights. And so we worked like with very artisanal ways. And but actually that's how we make almost every film, because there's no big industry and we have to invent things on the way. The important thing for me as a filmmaker and as a filmmaker in Ecuador is that 17 years ago, we finally logramos. Oh, my English, where is it going? We made it. We were able to establish public policies for filmmaking. And so 17 years ago, my first film was done when there was nothing of it, and it was like really starting from absolute scratch. But now, 17 years ago, we already have a film institute, and we have a film funding system that every year makes a public contest for projects. And through that, if you are lucky enough and if you work hard enough, you get the funding for every stage. And that's how this film was made. Otherwise, it would have been impossible. And with Ibermedia, which is an Ibero-American funding, public funding again, from all the states, that and they stimulate, they support films that are co-productions, which is very, very important, because that forces you, in a good way, to work with another country. So in this case, for example, we co-produced with Cuba, and all the music was composed, recorded, and produced in Cuba with Cuban musicians, with the national choir, the National Children's Choir of Cuba, and with an orchestra in Cuba. And I studied filmmaking in Cuba, so that was like very important for me. And also we had, in this case, the production designer from Colombia. So it forces us in a good way to work in collaboration with other countries. So those are like the financial foundations of the film, and all the rest is very hard work.
Plus Rambo.
And Rambo, of course.
Other questions?
Hello. Okay, glad this one's working. I really enjoyed the film, and I thoroughly enjoyed the usage of mythology-based metaphors and allegories throughout the film, particularly the perspective on the story of Icarus, where Wiki was talking about the fact that maybe he had made the decision to fly close to the sun, and that was like something that he was, actively pursuing. I was just curious how mythology and religious-based metaphors have played a role in some of your other films, or how they've acted as a source of inspiration, and how important of a device you feel it is in your films and films in general.
Oh, that's a beautiful question, because actually, as a screenwriter, I'm very much drawn to this idea that we don't write from scratch. It doesn't happen like inspiration. We write out of dialogue with all the stories that we have read and heard and have lived on. And what happens to me with mythology, ancient Greek mythology, for example, is that sometimes it works for me as therapeutic story reading again and again and again, and depending on what's going on in life. And in some moments, they work as illuminations, like they enlighten a very tragic or a very complex moment with this idea that the story was already told and already happened and always has an open meaning. The meaning was not closed 2,000 years ago or 2,500 years ago, but they're stories that always allow you to give them another meaning. And that always started to happen to me with biblical stories and religious stories, in a point where I had gone far enough from religious practice. I grew up a Catholic, and when I was a child, I was like a believer, and and then I grew distant from all that. And then when I started writing scripts, the stories came back, And so in a way, I realized that every film of mine has to do with one of the sacraments. Sacraments? You say sacraments? Yeah. The first one has to do with marriage and burial. It's not a sacrament, but it has to do with it. The second one has to do with baptism. The second one is called In the Name of the Girl. And this third one, for me, has to do with communion. With the girl at the beginning cannot eat and cannot conceive of sharing her story or sharing a meal with anyone. That's very subtle, but for me, it's very important. And then at some point, she finally is able to share the food, to share the drink, and to embrace her friends as a way of being in communion with them after she has been able to tell them what she is going through. I don't know if I answered the question, but I went from mythology to the Bible, and there's other, as you can see, there's Godot and there's Sisyphus, which is the myth, and then also the book from Camus, from Albert Camus, which talks about suicide as being the main issue we have all to deal with. This idea that we can actually end our lives if we want to, and this idea that the only big issue we have to deal with is should we go on or not, And so all these stories that have been that have touched me at some point, and other stories that are more subtle. There's the first paragraph of Cien Años de Soledad.
100 Years of Solitude.
Yeah,
Garcia Marquez.
It's cited also in the film. Yes, So what I want to say is that in a certain way, for me, writing is about citing. It's about citing. Is that yeah? Writing is about citing, and in that way, every writing process is a collective process. It's not an individual writing. It's an individual who is absolutely tied to various narrative traditions and stories and authors, and it's in some ways all just a reinterpretation that comes through what one has experienced in life and what one needs to tell.
The last thing I want to talk about before we close for the evening is kind of at the end when you say, oh, if this was a film, this would end this way, but it's not a film. And, which elicits chuckles even now, and it elicited chuckles during the film. But obviously what you have made is a film. And so I just wonder about that contradiction.
Yes. Actually, for me, it was it's always very important that that while we're watching a film or while we're reading a book, the author, in some way, at some point, my family is leaving. They have a plane to catch.
Oh.
I love you guys. Thanks for coming so far away to be with me. Okay, so where was I?
With making a film or writing a book or
Oh, yes. I've always loved the films or the books that while they're telling you this fictional story and you're so absorbed in that, they suddenly say, this is a story. This, I'm telling you this, and it's fiction and it's made and there's no reality to it, but it's true.
All right. On that note, we're going to wrap things up. Please join me in thanking our guests for being here. Tania, Jeff, Noah. Thanks to all of you for being here.
Thank you so much. Thank you for staying for the Q&A. I really appreciate it. And from now on, the film goes on its own. I'm going to write another script now.
There you go. It has its own journey. Please fill out your audience ballots, and there are folks willing and able to take them from you as you exit the theater. Thanks so much for joining us.
Oh, this was so beautiful.
Oh.